Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game. So, taking a very surprising video for you guys today, and even one that I didn't see coming until the announcement was out. That is because Virtua Racing on the Sega 32X has been 100% decompiled and 100% recompiled. If you're wondering what platform it was recompiled to, shockingly enough, it is the Sega 32X. This is a decomp and a recomp right back to the same platform that it started life on, but for very fundamentally important reasons. And trust me, this video is going to get a little bit deep divey into the technology behind decomps and recomps and explain exactly why this was done, what it could benefit for in the future, and just how important it truly is. Before I get too much further involved though, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and ring that notification bell. Definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, you got a Patreon link down below as well. Now obviously the Sega 32X version of Virtua Racing was pretty impressive for its time and era, because we didn't really have all that much 3D in homes unless you owned a 3DO console back in the day, before you waited for Sega Saturn, Nintendo 64, and PlayStation 1. This was kind of the bridge between the 2D and the 3D era, and even though Sega had decent hardware with the 32X, one of the biggest issues with it is that not all of the hardware was ever utilized properly or in its entirety, so we really don't 100% know exactly what the 32X is capable of hardware-wise. You've seen stuff like Doom 32X Fusion really pushing the hardware, but we really in the 3D realm could probably see the 32X do way more than we ever thought it could on paper. So that is why something like this is so fundamentally important. It's giving us a real peek behind the cloth and curtain when it comes to actually talking about this game. And that is why it's going to be so fundamentally important to go over the technology behind how this was done. And if you're wondering who did this, I'm going to try my best with the pronunciation. Matthias Zanoli was the one who decompiled and recompiled this game back to the 32X. So if we take a look here, it is a complete disassembly and analysis, and then it's recompiled, but there's changes in how the game actually functions into the ROM when it is recompiled, and that is all based on how the processing was done on the Sega 32X. Right now it has true parallel processing operations, and we're going to have to get a little bit nerdy in just a moment about something like that to explain it. But before you go down below in the comments and say, but we have the Sega Model 1 version in MAME, we have the remaster as well available on Switch and Switch 2, I totally 100% understand that. The best looking version, the best performant version of Virtua Racing on the Sega 32X is never going to rival the other versions we have. But that does not mean it doesn't have a very important reason to exist, and as I like to remind people on the channel, when they say that something's a waste of time, it isn't your time and developers can do whatever they want. But this one at face value may confuse a few people, but the reality of the situation is this decompiled code could now be ported to any platform, not just the 32X, and the learned information about how the 32X is processing and where the shortcomings in the code are could definitely benefit other 32X improvements in the future, because some games on 32X definitely could run a lot faster than they do if they just had some code help. And I also think that the 32X is a platform that could have a lot of homebrew development for in the future, because I would really love to see what people could do with the hardware, because obviously we do have ROM hacks like Doom 32X Fusion, but I would love to see a team take on a brand new 3D game on the 32X, maybe even in the beat 'em up genre. I think a full 3D beat 'em up would be absolutely amazing on the hardware. So basically with this recompilation, this is going to be an interesting concept to think about. You'll see all these different key features here, but the true parallel processing, master returns immediately, slave executes, vertex transform, is going to be the most important thing. I want you to think about it this way because I understand we're getting into a complicated topic. Imagine if you had to walk a mile. If you just started and stopped, you would have nothing delaying you outside of your own feet. Now imagine if you had to walk a mile and every time you put your right foot down, you had to check with your brain to make sure your left foot was ready, and then and only then were you allowed to continue to walk. That is what's going on in the base code of Virtua Racing in 32X. There are different halt commands why a chip waits for a response from something else versus running in parallel, and that just basically depresses the performance here because the two CPUs are not actually working as efficiently as possible. In this recompiled version of the game, you have true parallel processing, which in the future should actually improve the performance a bit, and would also be a very fundamentally important thing for the rest of the 32X. And I totally get that is a little bit of a deep concept. Just think of it like this: if you know how to do something and someone made you stop at every single step and check in with them to prove that you knew how to do it, it would just take you that much longer to perform. Now obviously we're talking about CPU cycles here, so they are over before you even have a chance to form the thought in your head, but it is the same concept. Now with the recompiled version, there is no wait command on any of the CPUs, the SH2s, and you can just kind of move forward with it. And so you can think about that a little bit in my example. We're going to go into our first soundtrack sample, 45 seconds, and I'll be right back with a lot more. So now that you've had a chance to sit with that thought, I hope it does make contextual sense to every single person out there. Now the CPUs are working in parallel, some of the command processors are offloaded to the second SH2, and they're no longer made to wait for a response before they can actually continue to execute, because those wait commands are just basically wasting cycles, and they're going to depress the performance on the game. Now there is a bigger, deeper dive into this on the GitHub page, which I will link in the description below, of exactly how this works, because don't forget, you have synchronization between the 68000 as well as the dual SH2 processors, and when you're trying to write code to utilize multiple processors, it is a very difficult thing to do. Some developers out there would basically just ignore some of the chips completely, maybe more famous on the Atari Jaguar versus the 32X, where they'd write just directly to the 68000 and ignore Tom and Jerry, but this is something that happens across systems with multiple CPUs. You'll see here you have to have a SH2 command wait blocking the synchronization between the chips, and then it has to wait for a response. That is lost time. Now in this recompiled version of the game, you're not going to have that. The code is going to be changed, and some things can't be changed just via ROM hacking. That's why a decompilation to get to the source code and understand how it works is so important, because then you can actually change the way the game is running and executing the code across the dual SH2s, and then recompile it with those changes. Now again, this is still an active project, and building the ROM can be quite difficult. You have to have an entire toolchain set up. This is not going to be a patch to a ROM that you use. You're going to have to go into the build environment, and I totally get it. If you just want to play the best version of something like Virtua Racing, you're not going to the 32X, you're going to the Switch remake, or you're going to MAME to play Sega Model 1 via emulation. But that does not make this any less important, because it is now more learned experience on the 32X side of things, and it is another fully decompiled game. So there is no necessary reason to recompile it to the 32X. Any developer out there that wanted to play around with it could take the decompilation and then do a code port to something like a modern PC environment. Now granted, the code on something like SH2 is going to be much different than C or anything else that we would use in modern days, but that does mean it can be done, and it is another platform now that has a full decompilation and recompilation on it, joining N64, Xbox 360, and others in this entire big decomp energy scenario here. And that is something that I absolutely love to see, and I was so excited when I saw this come to the 32X, because I really do think there is an area out there for developers to start making new games. But again, if you just want to play the best version of Virtua Racing, just go to the remake. I'm not here to convince you that the 32X version is quote-unquote worth playing. I'm here to convince you that it is worth decompiling and recompiling with these changes, because it is going to just make a big difference to 32X in the future. Think of all the other games on the platform that could get decompiled and then brought over to PC. Sure, it's not the most impressive library in the world, but there is something to love about it, and the 32X just deserves more attention in general, because it was very interesting hardware that Sega basically neglected and released at a point in time where the public really didn't want it. And after the Sega CD, people didn't really trust the 32X because they had gotten burned on add-on attachments before, and they knew the Saturn was coming, so nobody really wanted to buy the interim system. But it is really fun hardware. We have a MrWiseGuy core as well as software emulation. If you want to try this one out, definitely run it on Pico Drive. On RAs, it does seem to freeze and never really load up. But again, this progress is still ongoing, and it's one of those projects that is still going to have to see some work to see how far this could be pushed. but Sega 32X decompilations and recompilations are here, and I love when a game actually gets recompiled to the same platform it came from with improvements, because it's something we don't see all that often. Leave me a comment down below and you tell me favorite 32X game, and if you could snap your fingers and make one game get recompiled for PC, which one would it be? It's always a popular question. I love reading the answers because I hear some really good stuff. Short of that, we are done. I'll see you guys next time. Hope you enjoyed the video. Bye bye.